Welcome, dear viewers. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Was broke, desperate, and tired of crashing on my friend's couch. So when I saw the flyer tacked to the laundromat's bulletin board, I figured, why not? How hard could guarding a graveyard really be? That's how I ended up standing at the wrought iron gates of Hollow Creek Cemetery at 11:45 p.m., clutching a folded sheet of paper with the job's rules scribbled in fading ink. The wind hissed through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. The graveyard stretched beyond the gates, rows of crooked headstones disappearing into the thick fog that clung to the ground like ghostly fingers. A man was waiting for me inside the gate, a thin, stooped figure wrapped in a black coat, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "You're early," he rasped, handing me an old brass key. "Gate locks at midnight. Don't forget." I frowned. "You're the boss." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No. Just the last one." He pressed the key into my palm, then walked away, vanishing into the mist before I could ask what he meant. I stared after him, uneasy. Then I unfolded the paper, reading the handwritten rules again under the flickering light of the gate lamp. Lock the gate at midnight. No exceptions. Do not leave the office between 12:30 a.m. and 1 a.m. If you hear knocking at the office door during that time, do not answer. At 2:13 a.m., check camera 4. If you see a woman in white, look away immediately. Before sunrise, unlock the gate, but only if you hear birds singing. If not, stay inside. I shook my head, amused despite myself. Some kind of prank, I figured. Or maybe a weird tradition passed down by superstitious old-timers. Either way, I wasn't about to argue for $25 an hour. The small security office was near the center of the cemetery, a cramped brick building filled with dusty monitors, a creaky swivel chair, and an old coffee maker that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. I made myself comfortable, flipping through channels on the cameras. Nothing but empty headstones, fog, and the occasional rustling branch. Midnight came fast. I stepped outside, locking the gate with the brass key, the satisfying clunk echoing across the silent grounds. I glanced up at the moon, pale and swollen above the treetops, then returned to the office. 12:15 a.m. passed quietly. I leaned back in the chair, feet propped on the desk, eyes half-lidded from boredom. Then, at exactly 12:30 a.m., the first knock came. Knock. 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 I froze. The sound was soft, polite, but insistent. My breath caught in my throat. My gaze flicked to the clock, 12:30 on the dot. Another knock. The rule flashed through my mind, do not answer. I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs. Probably just some drunk messing around, I muttered, trying to convince myself. A third knock. Louder this time. The handle jiggled. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay seated. Ignore it, I whispered. It'll stop. But it didn't. The knocks grew frantic, fists pounding against the wood. Then came a voice, a woman's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Please, let me in, they're coming." My stomach twisted. My fingers hovered over the door's deadbolt. It's a trick, I told myself. Part of the rules. "Please," the voice whimpered, dissolving into quiet sobs. "They'll kill me." My jaw tightened. I squeezed my eyes shut. "No. I'm not opening it." Silence. The sobbing stopped. I waited, ears straining for any sound. Then came a soft tap at the window behind me. I whipped around. Nothing there. The clock read 12:58 a.m. Only 2 more minutes. Just 2 more minutes. Another tap. Closer. I edged away from the window, skin crawling. The monitors flickered. Static filled the screens. Then, for a brief second, camera 4 came into focus. A figure stood among the gravestones. Pale. Draped in white. Staring straight at the camera. The image glitched. Gone. 1 a.m. The pounding stopped. The night fell still again, as though nothing had happened. I exhaled shakily, collapsing back into the chair, heart still racing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. And when I glanced at the rule sheet again, a sixth rule had been added. Scrawled in fresh, wet ink at the bottom. 6. If you hear your own voice outside the office, do not answer. I stared at the paper, chills prickling down my spine. And then, from outside the office door, I heard myself. Hey, it's me. Open up. My blood ran cold. The voice was identical. Mine. I stepped away from the door, backing toward the far wall, the room spinning with terror. Come on, man, let me in. A fist pounded the door again, harder this time. Please, open the door. I covered my ears, shaking my head violently. No. No, no, no. The knocking stopped. Silence pressed in. And then, a whisper, inches from the crack beneath the door. I know you're in there. I fell to my knees, clutching the rule sheet tight, breath ragged. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the cemetery. The cameras flickered once more. On camera 4, the woman in white was standing at the gate. The gate I'd locked. And slowly, impossibly, she was opening it. The gate creaked open on the monitor, the woman in white gliding through as though gravity itself failed to tether her. I stared in disbelief. I'd locked that gate. I heard it click shut. The brass key still hung on the nail by the door. And yet, there she was, moving deeper into the cemetery, her pale gown trailing like mist across the ground. The gate creaked open on the monitor, the woman in white gliding through as though gravity itself failed to tether her. I stared in disbelief. I'd locked that gate. I heard it click shut. The brass key still hung on the nail by the door. And yet, there she was, moving deeper into the cemetery, her pale gown trailing like mist across the ground. My hands trembled as I adjusted the monitor's dial, zooming in. Her face was obscured by a curtain of long black hair, head tilted slightly forward, as though listening. Every step she took seemed deliberate, calculated. I felt a chill slither down my spine. The cameras flickered again. For a split second, her face snapped up toward the lens, eyes black as ink, mouth stretched into an inhuman grin. Then static. I staggered back from the screen. No, 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 I whispered, scanning the rule sheet again, desperate for an answer. But Rule 5 was clear, unlock the gate before sunrise only if you hear birds singing. If not, stay inside. No mention of what to do if the gate opened on its own. The clock ticked past 1:30 a.m. The air in the office felt heavier, pressing against me like invisible hands. I paced in tight circles, eyes darting between the monitors and the window, listening. Every creak of the old building sounded amplified. Every gust of wind outside carried whispers I couldn't quite understand. Suddenly, camera 3 flickered on. Movement. Something else was in the cemetery. A dark figure stood between two headstones, tall, hunched, wrapped in shadows. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just waited. The woman in white turned toward it. Slowly, almost reverently, she raised a hand and pointed in my direction. I froze. The dark figure shifted. Took one heavy step forward. Then another. And another. Heading straight for the office. My stomach twisted into knots. Think. Think, I muttered, scanning the paper again. Still nothing about this. No guidance. A soft scraping noise came from outside the office wall. I backed away from the window, flashlight clutched in my hand, its narrow beam slicing through the darkness inside. Then. A faint knock. Not at the door. At the window. I swallowed hard, inching closer, daring to peek outside. At first, I saw nothing, just the fog rolling between the graves. But then, a shape materialized just beyond the glass. The woman in white stood inches from the window, her face pressed against it, lips moving silently. A soft tap of her fingernail on the glass. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. Nope. Not opening. Not answering. She smiled. And behind her, the dark figure loomed closer, stepping into the pale wash of moonlight. Its face was a writhing mass of darkness, like dozens of mouths whispering over one another. The camera feed started blinking again. Then static. Then, darkness. The monitors shut off. The lights inside the office flickered, and died. Only the faint glow of my flashlight remained, casting jittery shadows on the walls. I gritted my teeth. Come on, stay calm. I tried to steady my breathing. Just wait it out. It's a prank. It's gotta be. The door handle rattled violently. My breath caught in my throat. Then came my own voice again, muffled but pleading. Please, man, let me in, they're right behind me. The rule sheet's ink seemed to shimmer under my flashlight. I read Rule 6 again: if you hear your own voice outside the office, do not answer. I know you're in there, the voice hissed. A heavy thud struck the door, hard enough to rattle it in its frame. Let me in. Another thud. And then, silence. I waited, every muscle tense, unwilling to move an inch. The clock read 2 a.m. Only 13 minutes until I had to check camera 4. I wiped sweat from my brow, sitting back down, flashlight still in hand. The cameras remained dead, screens black. Then, at 2:13 a.m., they flickered back on by themselves. Camera 4 glowed to life. There she was. The woman in white. Standing directly in front of the lens. Her face leaned close to the camera, lips still moving. I couldn't hear her, but I could feel her words crawling inside my skull. Look away. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. Don't look, don't look. A low hum filled the air. The monitors glitched violently, static rippling across every feed. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. Look away, I whispered again, rocking in the chair like a madman. And then, silence. I dared to open my eyes. The monitors showed nothing but empty graves. The woman was gone. I slumped forward, exhausted, trembling. Okay, almost there. The clock ticked toward 3 a.m. Suddenly, the printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out a fresh sheet of paper. I crept over, wary, and lifted it from the tray. New words had been typed across it in bold black ink. Rule 7, if the woman reaches the office, there's no going back. I dropped the paper as a soft tap came at the window. And there she stood. Closer than ever. Smiling. And behind her, dozens of figures rising from the graves, black shapes oozing from the earth, all turning their hollow faces toward me. I stumbled backward as she lifted a pale hand. And knocked again. The knocking grew louder, relentless, like the heartbeat of the cemetery itself. Each thud on the window was a sharp reminder that I had crossed a line, one I could never uncross. The woman in white stood, her face still twisted in that unnervingly wide smile, her black eyes now glowing faintly, as if the darkness had seeped into her very soul. I backed away from the window, desperately searching the room for something, anything, that could help me. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam wavering across the cluttered security office. But the office was a tomb now, the walls closing in on me with every passing second. The knocking continued, faster now, more frantic, as though she could feel the terror crawling through the air. Please, I whispered, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. Please, just let me leave. The figures behind her shifted, a movement so subtle it almost went unnoticed, except that I felt it. The ground trembled, just for a moment. A ripple that seemed to pass through the very air, shaking the room. Then, a cold wind burst through the cracks of the old window, howling like a chorus of mournful voices. I rushed to the door, slamming it shut, and locked it with trembling hands. The rules. The rules kept echoing in my head. I had to stay inside. I had to wait for sunrise. I had no choice. But the woman. She was still out there. Still knocking. Please, she whispered again, but this time the voice came not from the window. It came from within the office itself. I spun around, heart racing, as I saw her reflection in the security camera monitor. Her face was now pressed against the screen, her black eyes staring into mine, full of hunger. Her lips moved slowly, and though I couldn't hear the words, I felt them in my chest, vibrating my ribcage like a low hum. Look away. I tore my gaze from the screen and looked down at the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The rules. I had to follow the rules. But the rule sheet was gone. I searched frantically, scanning the room in a panic. The sheet, my only lifeline, was nowhere to be found. The air was suffocating now, thick with dread. I could hear the others now, the whispers of the figures beyond the window. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. They were all around me. Every breath I took felt like a mistake, every sound an omen. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Pitch black. I froze. In the complete darkness, the sound of the knocking seemed to reverberate through my skull. Tap. 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 The steady rhythm was maddening. A countdown. I reached for the flashlight again, but it slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. Tap. 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 The coldness in the air grew unbearable. I could hear something moving in the dark. Then. I heard it. The whisper of 1,000 voices, soft and indistinct. It was a hum, a drone, as though something ancient and unknowable was awakening beneath the earth. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble. The faintest rumble, like something massive, something old, stirring in the graveyard, clawing its way to the surface. A new rule appeared in my mind. You are never alone here. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled backward, trying to find a way out. But the door was locked. The windows were sealed. The woman in white was at the window now, her eyes glowing brighter, her smile wider. She had no body. Only that smile. That void of black eyes. And then, a crack. The ground beneath my feet shifted, a deep fissure splitting the earth just outside the office. I could hear the groaning of the soil, as if the cemetery itself were alive, its very bones breaking open. I stepped back, terrified, but my foot hit something on the floor, a small, brittle object. I bent down, picking up the cracked remnants of a stone. A gravestone, shattered into pieces. The whispering grew louder. The ground groaned again. The woman in white stepped forward, her movement impossibly slow, but her eyes never leaving mine. She was dragging something behind her, a black, slick shadow that coiled like smoke. I could feel it. Whatever was coming, whatever had risen, was now inside the office with me. The door behind me shuddered, the wood twisting like it was about to break. The first sliver of light appeared through the crack beneath the door, the faintest glow of dawn. The woman in white raised her hand. Her fingers twisted unnaturally as if broken at every joint. She beckoned me closer. I backed away, gasping for breath, but my legs refused to move. The room was closing in, suffocating me. Suddenly, the door burst open with a deafening crash. I screamed, stumbling back. There were no figures standing in the doorway. No one, in fact, was there at all. Just a gaping blackness that stretched on forever. And then I felt it. The coldness of the void at my back. The whispering had stopped. Silence. The ground trembled again. I turned slowly, as though in a trance, and looked at the woman in white. But she wasn't there anymore. She had never been. Instead, I saw myself, standing at the entrance of the office, smiling. The same black eyes. The same grin. Only it wasn't me. I looked at the cracked, broken stone in my hand. The piece of the gravestone. And realized what had happened too late. I had broken the rules. And now, I was one of them. I stood there, frozen, watching my own twisted reflection in the darkness. The grin on the figure, me, widened, and I felt something inside me stir, like the floodgates of a dam breaking open. A creeping sensation crawled from my chest, spreading outward, like something taking root in my soul. The stone in my hand was now pulsing with an unnatural warmth, the shattered pieces humming as if alive. My fingers clenched around it, not by choice, but because the stone was forcing itself deeper into my palm. I couldn't let go. I couldn't move. The air grew cold again, the same biting chill that had invaded the office earlier, but now it felt different. More oppressive. Heavier, like it was pushing me down, pressing my body to the ground with invisible weight. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of scraping, the sound of something dragging across the floor. My breath hitched as I slowly turned around. A figure stood in the doorway. But it wasn't the woman in white. It wasn't even a human figure at all. It was a thing, an amalgamation of shadows, its body constantly shifting, twisting in unnatural angles, like it was made from the very darkness itself. Its face, or what was left of it, was a void, filled with hundreds of hollow eyes, all staring at me. The shape stepped forward, moving like liquid smoke, sliding through the room without touching the ground. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. My limbs refused to move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed. Trapped. The thing spoke, but its voice was nothing like the woman's soft whisper. It was low and guttural, like the groan of the earth itself, the rumbling sound of something ancient and buried for centuries. You broke the rules, it rasped. Now you belong to the cemetery. I stumbled back, my back hitting the desk, the cold wood pressing into my spine. My mind reeled, unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. I had to be dreaming. There had to be a rational explanation. But then I looked down at the piece of gravestone in my hand, the shards still pulsing with that strange, malevolent warmth. It was real. Everything was real. The thing continued its slow advance, its form stretching and shifting with every step it took. The air in the room grew heavier, more suffocating, and I felt a sense of vertigo, like I was falling into a deep abyss. You never should have stayed, it whispered. You should have left when you had the chance. Now, the cemetery claims you. I could barely breathe. The weight in the air grew unbearable. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as if the earth itself was starting to split open. The fissures were widening. I could hear them now, low, guttural rumbles coming from beneath the floor. I looked around wildly, my gaze darting to the window, desperate for any chance of escape. But outside, there was nothing but darkness. The woman in white was gone. The cemetery was silent. Yet, I could feel the presence of something vast, something waiting just beyond the edge of my perception. Suddenly, the monitors flickered back to life. Camera 1 showed the graveyard again, the stillness broken only by the faint rustling of trees in the wind. Camera 2 showed the entrance gate, still locked and unopened. But it was camera 3 that caught my attention. There she was. The woman in white. Standing directly in front of the office window again. Her black eyes were fixed on the screen, staring directly into my eyes. I could see her smile now, wider, grotesque, almost too large for her face. Then she spoke. "Come outside. It's your turn." Her voice was no longer soft and gentle. It was sharp, like the crack of a whip, the sound of something ancient and hungry. I couldn't move. My feet felt as though they were glued to the floor. My hands were shaking so violently that the stone piece in my grip rattled. The thing in the doorway took another step forward, its form growing larger with each passing second. It loomed over me, the oppressive darkness of its body swallowing up the light in the room. Its eyes, hundreds of them, flashed with an unnatural hunger, and I knew, without a doubt, that if I didn't act now, I would never leave this place. I had to break the rules. The thought was simple, instinctual. I had already broken them once. What was one more violation, one more step into the abyss? What was the difference between staying and going now, when both paths led to the same fate? I ran to the window, my hand slamming against the cold glass. The woman in white was still there, watching me. Her smile grew wider, her form distorting like smoke in the wind. I didn't have time to think. I threw the window open with all my strength, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sharp sound was like a scream that split the silence. I climbed out, onto the ledge, desperate for freedom. My feet barely found purchase as I stepped onto the ground below, the weight of the air pressing down on me, threatening to crush me under its force. But then, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed as I was yanked backward, my body thrown to the ground. I looked up, and there, standing above me, was the woman in white, her face inches from mine. Her smile was gone, replaced by an empty void where her eyes should be. "You should have stayed inside," she whispered. "You shouldn't have left." A low, rumbling growl echoed from the ground beneath us. The earth itself was groaning, shifting. The cemetery was alive, alive in ways that I had never imagined. And then the ground opened up. The ground split open beneath me with a deafening crack, as though the very earth had become a living, breathing entity. The sensation was more than just a shift in the soil, it was as if the ground itself had a mind, and it was pulling me into its depths, eager to claim me. I screamed as the cold earth closed in around my body, my hands clawing desperately at the dirt, trying to push myself free. But the cemetery wasn't just a place, it was a prison, an ancient one, designed to keep its secrets buried forever. And I had disturbed them. The woman in white was still standing above me, her smile now a grotesque, twisted thing, stretched impossibly wide. Her black eyes were voids that seemed to draw all the light from the world, swallowing everything they touched. I could feel the pull of her gaze, tugging at my very soul, draining the life from me with every breath I took. "You should have followed the rules," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the deafening noise of the earth moving beneath us. "Now, you are ours. Forever." I was being dragged deeper, the earth seeming to open wider as I descended into its cold, unfeeling depths. The more I struggled, the tighter the grip of the soil became. My fingers scraped against the rough ground, but there was no escaping it. Suddenly, there was a tremor, then another. The ground shuddered, and a series of loud cracks echoed through the air, like the sound of bones snapping. The earth heaved upward in sharp, violent bursts, and I felt myself being pulled back toward the surface. The air was thick, thick with something ancient and suffocating. The thing that had been waiting all this time had awoken. From the depths of the graveyard, shadows began to rise, figures. Dozens of them, rising from the earth like marionettes pulled from the strings of some unseen force. They were not human, not anymore. Their bodies were twisted, rotting, and covered in the remnants of old graves, dirt, moss, and brittle bones. But their eyes were the same as the woman in white's. Black and empty, hollow voids that seemed to drain the very light around them. The figures moved like a tide, slowly crawling up from the earth, their limbs jerking in unnatural ways. They reached out toward me, their fingers skeletal and cold, dragging their broken bodies forward as if driven by some irresistible force. I was no longer alone. As I was dragged from the earth, the figures closed in, their hands grasping at me, pulling me toward them. Their voices, no longer whispers, began to rise in a low, hollow chant, repeating over and over, "You broke the rules, you belong to us now, you belong to the grave." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, my limbs no longer responding. The cemetery had claimed me, just as it had claimed them. The figures that rose from the ground were once like me, alive, breathing. But now they were part of the graveyard, bound to it for eternity. And I could feel it. The pull, the weight of the cemetery itself. The very soil seemed to be alive, alive with hunger, alive with ancient power. It had no mercy, no compassion. It only took. Then I saw it, at the heart of the graveyard, the dark mass, the epicenter of the curse. The thing that had been waiting. It was massive, a writhing mass of shadow and bone, a twisted, horrific creation born from the graveyard itself. It had no face, no form, just a shifting mass of limbs and eyes, endless, unblinking eyes. It was the source of everything, the thing that had been awakened by my breaking the rules. I was being pulled toward it, forced to kneel before it, as the figures circled around me. Their eyes were fixed on me, the hunger in their gaze palpable, as if they were waiting for the final moment when I would join them, when I would be swallowed by the earth, never to return. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't accept this. I couldn't let the graveyard win. I mustered all the strength I had left, pushing through the cold grip of the cemetery and the endless chant of the figures. My hands found the shard of the gravestone that I had dropped earlier, still pulsing with that unnatural warmth. With a desperate cry, I drove the stone into the earth, into the very center of the cursed ground. The impact was like a thunderclap, and the air around me rippled with energy, like a shockwave spreading outward. The figures staggered back, their hollow eyes wide with shock. The earth itself seemed to shudder under the weight of the force. The dark mass at the center of the graveyard screamed, no, it howled. The sound was deafening, the pain of it almost unbearable. It was a cry that shook the heavens and earth, a cry that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality itself. The ground trembled. The figures shrieked in agony as the soil around them began to crack and break apart, their bodies being consumed by the earth once again. The shadowy mass writhed and twisted, trying to escape, but it was too late. The stone had broken its power. The rules had been restored. But it was not over yet. As the last of the figures disappeared into the earth, I felt a deep, crushing weight settle over me. The cemetery's grip on me loosened, but only just enough for me to stand. I could see the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The earth still trembled, but now it was silent. The woman in white was gone. The graveyard was still. But the rules had not forgiven me. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching, my mind shattered by the horrors I had witnessed. The piece of gravestone still clutched in my hand was now nothing more than a dull, lifeless rock. I looked around at the cemetery, at the graves that had once seemed so peaceful. They were no longer quiet. They were waiting. And I knew that I could never escape. Not really. The rules were still there, buried deep within the cemetery, and they would always call to me. They would always be watching. And no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, the graveyard would always find me. The end.